there are some members of the Democratic Party, again, who I don't think are quite as crazed as like the Bernie squad wing of the Democratic Party, but the younger generation is definitely moving in the wrong direction on all of that. And on the right side of the aisle, you do have a younger generation that is, kind of Trumpy in orientation, but I've always had trouble sort of determining exactly what that means in terms of policy. Mm-hmm. It seems more like an affect than a policy. The love for Trump is largely based on the way that he approaches the world, not necessarily based on his policy, which is why I think that for everybody running against him, they're attacking Trump on policy. Like Ron was running against him from the right. He was saying, okay, he's wrong on this, I'm right on this. And the entire base was like, meh. And everybody was like, okay, well, doesn't the policy matter? And the answer is no, the policy doesn't matter. The affect actually matters. So, if that's the case, I do think that as the parties get more and more brash in their rhetoric, there will be the rise of an independent party. If RFK's campaign were more well organized, RFK would win 15 to 20% in this election cycle.
Let's talk about the other side of the aisle for a second, because it seems to me like Biden is the last vestige of anything sane we're going to see on the Democrat side for a long, long time. Like, they brought him in to kind of hold the door and make sure the crazies didn't get in. He still let the crazies in, but he's old, so people don't fully realize it. Like, do you think this is the end of anything close to a Democrat party that we've had in America for the last 50 years? Like, after this, it is the party of the wackadoodle progressives officially?
So I do have some hope that there are some people inside the Democratic Party who have not completely lost their minds. John Fetterman would be a great example of this, right? They're still
the guy who had brain damage 6 months ago is now the sanest Democrat. It's incredible.
It's totally wild. I mean,
Daily Wire should make a movie about that, by the way.
It's amazing. It's like Awakenings. It's like it's like.
I said that on my show earlier.
Yeah. It's totally amazing. I mean, Fetterman has been incredible. He's been great on the border. He's been great on the Middle East. He's been great on a wide variety of issues. I hope
it ends better than Awakenings. In Awakenings, he ends up back in the coma.
Yeah. No, hopefully there's no parallel. The kind of status of the Democratic Party. I think that the Democratic Party, if they lose an election, if they lose to Trump, the left is going to take over the party for the foreseeable future, because the reaction is going to be that they lost because Biden was too moderate. And the media are going to, of course, foment exactly that. Now,
but would it matter? Would it matter? Because it seems to me that he's just pretending not to be a bananas one. The policies are, what policy could possibly be worse?
Yes. I mean, so the only thing that matters is that the open embrace of the policy does, in fact, lead you down the slippery slope to the next crazy thing. So, there is something to the idea that if Biden ran as a moderate and then governed as a leftist, that is better than him running as a leftist and then governing as a further leftist. That if you always end up to the left of where you campaign, which is pretty frequent, right? I mean, that seems to be the case for Republicans and Democrats, by the way, is that you tend to govern more to the left than you actually campaigned as very often. But certainly for Democrats, if you govern to the left of where you campaigned, then where you campaign, if you can use that as sort of a baseline, then it kind of matters, I suppose, if you campaign as a moderate, or if you feel that's where the appeal is. At least you're trying to read the American people, as opposed to being sort of the fomenting factor in generating hard left pushes. And there are some members of the Democratic Party, again, who I don't think are quite as crazed as like the Bernie squad wing of the Democratic Party, but the younger generation is definitely moving in the wrong direction on all of that. And on the right side of the aisle, you do have a younger generation that is, kind of Trumpy in orientation, but I've always had trouble sort of determining exactly what that means in terms of policy. Mm-hmm. It seems more like an affect than a policy. The love for Trump is largely based on the way that he approaches the world, not necessarily based on his policy, which is why I think that for everybody running against him, they're attacking Trump on policy. Like Ron was running against him from the right. He was saying, okay, he's wrong on this, I'm right on this. And the entire base was like, and everybody was like, okay, well, doesn't the policy matter? And the answer is no, the policy doesn't matter. The affect actually matters. So, if that's the case, I do think that as the parties get more and more brash in their rhetoric, there will be the rise of an independent party. If RFK's campaign were more well organized, RFK would win 15 to 20% in this election cycle.
What do you think about him taking over the Libertarian Party? Because that's being talked about now. Then he gets ballot access, and then it's like you actually could affect the election. I'm not saying he'd be president, but if he got 20% of the vote, depending on where it was coming from, it's like he absolutely could swing the election.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if he did that, the first move he would have to make is to defenestrate everyone in the Libertarian Party. Right? Number one, he's not a Libertarian. But number two, I think that the stigma, the brand stigma of the Libertarian Party, which is naked people dancing around on stage at their convention, is pretty strong. And if the rip on RFK is that he's a little kooky, then associating with the kooky party is probably not helpful. He'd be better off going no labels if they actually have ballot access, because then he can claim to be sort of the moderate, middle-of-the-road guy who's still rational and reasonable. And again, like, I think there are a lot of people both right and left who would take a look at RFK.
Right, but the fact of the matter is the Libertarians are on all the ballots, and that,
yes, they are.
that shiny thing might just be enough to make them do it. I want to ask you about the border stuff, because there's something interesting going on here, and I've watched some of your videos, and I saw what you're saying on Twitter, and I'm completely in agreement, and that, you know, these 25 Republican governors are doing the right thing, and Abbott's doing the right thing and all that. But does this put more conservative-leaning people in a bizarre position that suddenly, at least the optics of it, appear that we are now the ones who will not listen to the Supreme Court, and that's not how it's supposed to be?
So I don't think that optic is going to work. I mean, number one, it's not legally true, obviously. There's been no actual thing demanded of the state of Texas. The case that went before the Supreme Court was about whether the federal government has the capacity to dismantle razor wire. It did not, in fact, tell the state of Texas not to erect the razor wire in the first place. And so, yeah, the state of Texas actually hasn't violated Supreme Court order at all at this point. And what they're doing right now is going to end up being challenged in the courts, presumably, if they would deny access or if they would attempt to enforce some sort of deportation orders on their own. I'm not aware that Governor Abbott, by the way, has actually done that. I'm not aware that there's been actually any policy whereby people are being arrested and then, quote unquote, deported by the state of Texas. I don't think that that's actually happened yet. They're being pretty careful about how they're approaching this from a legal point of view. Again, I don't think that this is going to come down to Civil War type actual Civil War, people fighting each other on the border sort of thing. I think that the worst case scenario here, and this is why I've been encouraging civilians to stay out of that area, is when you see protesters who are deciding they're going to go and they're going to stand on the border, we need to draw attention to all this. Believe me, the attention's already there. The last thing we need is somebody coming to blows with the Border Patrol agents, and then Joe Biden and the administration using that as an excuse to crack down on everybody on the right and open the border at the same time. Like, we don't need any of that. Well, what Abbott is doing is pretty well calibrated at this point.
What, I mean, would you do anything else if you were Abbott? So if you were the governor of a border state at this point, what would you be doing?
I mean, unless Abbott is, again, willing to look at legal options as far as what deportation actually looks like, I think that it's going to be a problem. But yeah, again, in the end, this is going to be a federal issue. Like what he's doing right now by basically saying, okay, fine, you want to let people loose in Texas? They're going to Chicago. That's a pretty good policy. I mean, if you're the governor of Texas, that's the right policy. That is, okay, we're not going to absorb the cost of this. You guys who voted for this are going to absorb the cost of this. I'm not sure there's ever been a more effective political stunt/maneuver than the shipping of illegal immigrants to sanctuary cities. It's truly like an amazingly effective political maneuver.
So since we started this show by talking about it, we've been doing this together for about 10 years, and things have precipitously seemingly gotten worse, or at least crazier. I mean, it seems to me that the border thing is going to be the thing that leads everything to really getting crazy. And I'm not into this Civil War conversation either, but I really do see almost no way around the states going their separate ways at this point. It just does not, just for the reason that you just laid out, that you're saying the competent thing for a Republican governor to do is send them to blue states. Well, that can only hold for so long. I mean, what do you make of that general concept? You know, you've probably seen that map going around Twitter where they've got Texas and border in some of those southeast states, almost all the way into Arizona. Not civil war, attacking each other on the streets, but just kind of separating, almost sort of how the founders were kind of into it a little bit.
Well, I mean, this basic idea that you need to actually go back to a form of subsidiarity, I think would be the great hope. I mean, it's the reason why people like you and people like me left California and went to a state that we like better. I'm very much in favor of the big sort. I think that if you don't like living a California lifestyle, then you should leave California and you should go to Florida. And if you don't like Florida, you should go to California. I think all of that is quite good. But there will have to be, at some point, a recognition that the federal government cannot simply cram down on the half of the country that doesn't like what the federal government is doing federal policy. That if we are actually going to share a country that shares, for example, a foreign policy, a tax system, and any sort of federal, programs, if we're going to do that, then the hand of the government is going to have to get lighter, not heavier. And my great fear is that as people, that it's General Tarkin, right? That as the galaxies are slipping out of his grasp, then he's going to grip tighter. And I think that's what you're starting to see from the federal government. When the real answer to that would be, let everybody breathe a little bit. Like, let Texas be Texas, let California be California, and yes, enforce your basic duties. If, by the way, any president who actually runs on that platform is going to win. Any president who actually runs on the platform of, we're not here to make California be Texas, and we're not here to make New York be Florida, but vice versa also applies. and also I'm enforcing the border, and also America is going to retain its position as the most powerful country on the planet, that simple statement probably makes you the president.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop screaming, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.